Iman of the Quran has got nothing to do with belief. You are not a mu'min in the Quran if you believe certain things. Assalamu alaikum. With an open mind, let's explore this term within the Quran itself and let the Quran guide us. Before I continue, I would like to make this claim that I have never ever made in any of my videos before. Iman is the most important topic in the whole of the Quran. That, along with the term Islam, there are no other terms, I would say, that are more important than these two terms. I would go on and reiterate the point saying that more important than these so-called 5 pillars are the concepts Iman and Islam. Why? Because these are the two most important groups in the Quran. If you don't know who the mu'minun are, if you don't know who the Muslimun are, if you don't know what Islam is, if you don't know what Iman is, and you continue to read ayah after ayah after ayah in the Quran, do you really understand who the Quran is talking to? If we don't understand these two primary groups in the Quran, that the Quran is addressed to, what the Quran is talking about, what do we really understand? I have here a confession. I have here an honest confession. I have now been actively pondering the Quran for about 5 years, if not more. 5 years. And I only now really understood what Iman of the Quran is, what Islam of the Quran is, and what the Iman of the Quran is. And specifically, what do terms like Iman billah or Iman bil ghaib mean? I never really quite understood these two terms until now, 5 years after my journey. When I understood Iman for the very first time, I really understood it, and specifically when I'm talking about the term Iman, whenever that comes coupled with be something, Iman billah, Iman bil ghaib, Iman bil rusul, Iman bi al yawm al akhir. When I understood this, I got goosebumps. But I also felt not just a tinge of sadness. I was extremely disappointed. I was extremely sad. Why? Because no one ever took me through this simple meaning of the term within the Quran. This most pivotal term in the Quran around which the Quranic message revolves. I didn't know. I didn't really understand. I thought I did, and I wasn't completely wrong, but I never really understood it. And I continued to make it out to be a difficult term when it really wasn't. Before I continue further, are you one of those people who are saying, well, I know Iman. Iman is simple. Iman is straightforward. This guy Moses has no idea what he's talking about. Iman is really straightforward. It is believing that the following things exist. Allah, His messengers, His malaika, His kutub, and that there's going to be this last day, etc., etc. And if you are Sunni, then you're going to add Al-Qadr into this picture as well. So Iman is completely understood. It's a solved problem. Now, yes, you might say, Akhi, there are some debates that Iman may also mean reflecting what you believe through your tongue, as in saying it out loud. And also some would say it also means you do things, you show outward manifestation of your beliefs inside. So if you really believe in Allah and you really believe in His messengers, then surely you would say that out loud, you would declare this, but then you would also go and participate in these rituals that make the point absolutely clear to anybody that yes, this guy doesn't just believe, doesn't just say, but he does have Iman in the Rusul, in the Kutub, because he is seen all of the time either reading the Quran or attending these conferences, these majalis where talk of the messenger is being made. But I will tell you, this is not the Iman of the Quran. Iman of the Quran has got nothing to do with believing things, storing information in your heart, storing up your memory banks with data or certain statements or propositions. Allah does not need you, me, the whole of mankind to acknowledge Him. He does not need you, me, all of us to acknowledge His messengers. None of us matter a thing to Him. This is not what He's asking for from us when He talks about having Iman. This is not what He's talking about. If you still insist that no, you do understand what Iman is, and Iman is, as we talked about before, I'm just going to present a couple of ayat of the Quran just to make sure that you get an appreciation for why this is not an easy topic. Or it's not easy so long as we hold on to the traditional understanding of what Iman is, who a mu'min is, who ya ayyuhalladhina amanu are. Did you know that Allah himself calls himself the mu'min in the Quran? Allah is al-mu'min, and he is the first mu'min if we go and understand Allah to be the being, the originator, as in there was nothing, no one before him, there will be no one after him. And if he refers to himself as the al-mu'min, then A, he is a mu'min, and by our definition he is believing in something, but most problematically we still don't know what or who he believes in. When we say Allah is the al-mu'min, and that used to be a question that always puzzled me, and I read many an explanation for this, but I never really understood this. But the question is that I'm posing to you: what does this term mean when we talk about Allah? Now, what the translators do, what the mufassirin do here, is that they do translate this term properly when it comes with Allah. So, huwa Allahu alladhi la ilaha illahu, and when they come to the part for the al-mu'min, they do translate this correctly. But whenever this very same term is utilized for anybody else in the Quran, the meaning completely and utterly changes. Suddenly, this term is now talking about people who have to believe certain things that others have no way of confirming, and those people are often uttering phrases as well that proves to us that indeed those people are mu'minun. Let's talk about another ayah. Does the messenger not believe in his message? And I'm going to be very blunt here. Did Nabi Muhammad, did Rasul Muhammad not believe? Did he not believe in the Quran that was revealed to him? Because this is what this ayah here seems to be suggesting. And yes, you can play linguistical acrobatics here to try and find a way out of the implications here. But what the sentence here says is quite obvious and quite damning if you stick to the traditional understanding of Iman, which is saying things or believing things. The ayah says, Amana Rasul, so the messenger believed, bima unzila ilayh, and the traditional understanding, in what has been sent down to him from his Lord. Amana Rasul, the Rasul believed in what was revealed to him from his Lord. Does the messenger not believe? Did the messenger not believe in what was sent to him? Did Allah have to tell us that even though this person had become Ar-Rasul, the messenger, he had to do Iman after the fact? And isn't this kind of ironic that the messenger who first-hand receives this message from Allah, or second-hand if you talk about Jibreel here, as an angel as they say, he required all of these things before he could believe, but we never even saw this messenger. We are removed by centuries from Jibreel and the transmission of the Quran, and yet we are meant to believe this? Does that sound correct to you? Does that sound logical to you? Does that sound reasonable to you? Did you also know, by the way, that Iblis in the Quran, he never really ever denies Allah, does he? Yes, he argues with Allah. If we go by the traditional understandings of the certain ayat, he has debates with Allah. He makes certain claims. He gets certain concessions. But did Iblis ever say that, oh Allah, I don't trust in you, I don't believe in you? That would be wrong, because Iblis is there having these conversations with Allah. And thereby, he, by very definition, knows that there is the creator of this entire universe. Question, was he a mu'min then? He believed more than any messenger could have believed, because no messenger, apart from some, per the understanding that we traditionally have, got to communicate with Allah, but Iblis was right there. Was he a mu'min or not? Clearly, there's a problem with the traditional understanding, with the way I understood this term up until now, because I never really could divorce myself from what was fed to me by my upbringing, really. I had to really empty my cup, be humble, and let the Quran really explain its own term to me here. Before we go any further, this is the second video of the series, Islam and Eeman. And we are going to lay foundations for what is Iman here, just like we did for Islam in the video before. If you have somehow gotten onto this video, maybe it's worthwhile to go and watch the first video as well, so you understand how we talked about the term Islam in there. But anyway, we're going to talk about what is Iman, and just like what we did before, we're going to start with the basics. And the basics are that in Arabic, unlike many other languages, morphemes, they determine how words are formed, they are consistent, and they allow us to understand the meaning of words completely divorced from how the meaning might get hijacked by certain groups of people, or how the meaning might stray after a lot of time passes. We covered these slides in great detail in the previous video, video 1 of the series, so I'm going to go really quickly in here. I will cover still what we're going to talk about in here, but I will not delve into the same details as I did in the first video. And once more, a special thanks goes to this amazing person who really made me understand the final bit that was lacking for me always. Either which way, in Arabic linguistics, verbs fall into two main categories. They are intransitive, al-af'al al-lazima, that do not require an object, and transitive, muta'addi, verbs that do require an object. These concepts are the same in Arabic as they are in English. How do we make transitive verbs in Arabic? We do them by adding a hamza at the beginning of the verb. So hazina is he is sad, ahzana he makes someone else sad. We went through two examples in the previous video. I'm not going to go into detail in here, but I'm going to keep the slide here anyway in case you are interested. We're going to go to the next slide, which is where we talked about and derived the correct linguistic understanding of who a Muslim is and what does Islam mean. We're going to start from here. So if we utilized the morphemes of Arabic that are indisputable, in fact, all the research that I've done so far, no one, even from the traditional camp, would argue with what we're talking about in terms of usage of morphemes to understand terms like Islam and Eeman, because what we are saying is what Arabic is built on. Instead, what we find is that the meaning, the simple linguistical meaning of these terms has been hijacked by a religion to mean something different to what the linguistic roots say. And what we are obviously doing in this series is, A, we're going back to the roots, we're looking at the simple laws of grammar in Arabic to see what those terms are actually supposed to mean. Then we're looking at the Quran and we're seeing, do those terms actually work within the Quran in a consistent manner? For those who are more interested in the methodology that I follow, I would encourage you to go and watch the video that I did on methodology around about 10 months ago on this very same channel. Moving on, salima is an intransitive verb. There's a mistake, there's a typo in there. It's an intransitive verb, salima. He felt peace, state of no conflict, he was in harmony. Yaslamu, he feels peace, he's in a state of no conflict, he's in harmony. Thus, he is salim. If we make it a transitive verb, he does this action on others. We add the hamza and the morphemes become like this. Aslama, he caused or gave peace or harmony to others, right? So this is the nature of the verb now changing from something that was limited to a person, now going to a group or going to a maf'ul, going to an object. Yuslim, he causes, gives peace or harmony. Yuslim, the doer of this action becomes Muslim. And the verbal noun, which is the act of doing this, maintaining peace, maintaining harmony, the state where no harm is being offered. The masdar, the verbal noun, is Islam. As we said before in the last video, there's no religion here. There's none whatsoever. There's nothing that's being asked of you to declare from your tongue. Nothing that you're asked to believe. None of the rituals are being forced on you that you must now go and perform. None of that. If you are causing harmony, or if you are maintaining harmony, if you're maintaining peace, if you're living in a state where you're not offering conflict, as in it's the opposite of in a state of fight, you're not offering harb to anybody else, then you are a Muslim. You are a Muslim. And that state, that being is Islam. That verbal noun is Islam. There's nothing difficult about it. There's nothing indisputable grammatically. It's a simple concept. We are going to apply the same thing now to Iman and Mu'min. The same exercise. Amina is an intransitive verb. When I say Amina, he felt secure, safe. When I say ya'manu, he feels secure, safe. Thus, he is Amin, just like Salim. When we talked about Salima. If we want to make Amina a transitive verb, as in an action is now done by a subject to somebody else, we add the Hamza. He granted security, safety to others. He removed fear. Amana, amana. He grants security, safety, removes fear. Yu'minu, yu'minu. And if you are the doer of this action, you are the active participle, you are a mu'min. And this whole exercise, the verbal noun here, the masdar, where you are causing security, safety or protection, you're removing fear, that masdar, that verbal noun is Iman. That is Iman. Very simple, very straightforward. Once more, you don't need to be an expert in rocket science to understand this. You don't need a PhD to understand this very simple morpheme-derived method for understanding these terms. If there's a person who grants security, grants, the key word being here, grants, actively. He works, he's authoritative, he's got the capability, and he removes fear from you, from an entity in a particular situation. He does the action of yu'minu for somebody else, and if he is doing it as the active participle, he is mu'min, and the action, the verbal noun, is Iman. Once more, no religious baggage necessary. Nothing that you are being asked linguistically so far to believe or to store in your memory banks. None of that stuff. None of that stuff so far. Just to really prove this point and just to really make sure we're all on the same page here, I would like to use the same table that we used in the first video, but I'm going to add the term amina or the verb amina into the same table as well. So we're going to ignore the intransitive verbs because they're not the point of discussion here. But if you look at the transitive verbs, if you listen to how I say the words, you are going to hear the awzan, the morphemes, and they are all the same morphemes. Arabic is consistent in how these terms, these verbs, these nouns are derived from the source. Qaruba. Qaruba is aqraba. Aqraba, to bring closer. He brought something closer. Aqraba. Hazina is ahzana. Salima is aslama. Aslama, he offered no harm. Amina is amana. He granted security. He removed fear. If you go to the mudari'a, the present tense, qaruba yuqribu, someone who makes something close. Yuhzinu, from hazina. Yuslimu, from salima. And yu'minu, from amina. So if you are somebody, just like what we said before, if you are granting security, if you are granting safety, if you're removing fear and adversity, then you are doing the act. This is a verb that applies to you. Yu'min, anta tu'min. And the fa'il is muqrib, muhzin, muslim, mu'min. So once more, mu'min is following the same morphemes that we find for these other verbs as well. The verbal nouns, the masdar, iqrab from qaruba, ihzan from hazina, islam from salima, Iman from amina. Iman from amina. Just like qaruba, hazina, salima have got nothing to do with the religion in their own rights, similarly, amina has got nothing to do with any religious requirement for you to believe stuff. There are no requirements to do that linguistically. So long as we are able to remove ourselves from the taint of the fiqh, the hadith, the riwayat, the kutub, the rijaluddin, so long as we can remove ourselves from how they have transformed, they've maimed these terms, so long as we can remove ourselves from what they say, how they've twisted these words, then understanding Iman, Mu'min, Islam, Muslim is piece of cake. It really is. Let's summarize these linguistic points. A Mu'min is one who grants security and peace. He actively, again the emphasis is on, he actively, authoritatively removes fear. So Mu'min is seen doing. It's an act that you do. It's not something that you believe. Let me give you an example. If you are the world's best software engineer and you know all of that knowledge and you claim that you know that, but you don't deliver. I never see any code from you. You never ever commit anything from your knowledge. You offer nothing. You write no programs. You are worthless. I have no reason then to believe that you do know coding, that you do know programming. You have to be seen to be working for me to be able to say, yes, this guy does know. He does know what he claims he knows. So similarly, a mu'min, you can hold whatever great standards that you may have about spreading peace. But if you're not doing it, you're not a mu'min. You could be an idealist, yeah, but then again, I've got no way of proving it. But the only way for you to be a mu'min is if you are doing acts of spreading amn, if you are actively removing adversity from lives. Iman, again, the spreading of security and safety, the active removal of harm, the verbal noun, once more, a visible state, nothing to do about internal beliefs. Well, you could here argue that the reason a person does these acts is because he internally believes it. And I will not deny that. I will not deny this because, yes, physical manifestation or physical act is very often reflective of what one holds dear in his own heart. And that is absolutely correct. But the only way for societies to work and the only thing that linguistically we can ever establish is based upon what we witness, not based upon what someone says, and most specifically, not based on something that you believe or you claim to believe. Before we go further, I would also like to take this time to make a distinction between Muslim and Mu'min. A Muslim offers no conflict. He remains peaceful towards the others, but he is largely passive. He is largely passive. He's not causing grief. He's not actively seeking problem. It's not a problem child. He is happy-go-lucky. He doesn't cause you grief. A Mu'min, on the other hand, is the authoritative party here. This person here or this party here grants security. This party or people, they remove fear. These are active people. They are authoritative. They have the capability of making changes, and they do make those changes. Similarly, we can say that all mu'mins by definition are Muslims, but not all Muslims by definition are mu'min. You could be a Muslim, you could be someone who doesn't cause trouble, but you may not be someone who actively goes and fixes things. And this is the difference between Muslim and mu'min linguistically at least. Does this hold in the Quran or not? We're going to talk about this. Like we did in the first video, we are now going to see whether the linguistic, simple, straightforward meaning of Iman and Mu'min applies to the Quran in this ayat as well or not. Or does the Quran uses these terms in a different sense? We're going to start with this very famous ayah from a very famous surah, Surah Quraysh. And the ayah goes, الَّذِي أَطْعَمَهُمْ مِنْ جُوعٍ وَآمَنَهُمْ مِنْ خَوْفٍ. Who provided them with food to ward off hunger, granted safety to ward off fear. وَآمَنَهُمْ مِنْ خَوْفٍ. This is the party, this is the participle, the active participle with the power who did this act. He granted amn, he granted safety, he secured people from khawf, from fear. And thus, the person or the entity who did that was mu'min. And this is the fact that is crystallized by the ayah that we looked at the very beginning. And if you read this ayah with this correct understanding, we find that the meaning holds. هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الملك القدوس السلام المؤمن. I'm going to stop here. He is Allah. There is no God other than Him. The controller, the Holy One, source of peace, the all peace, the granter of security. Al-Mu'min, Al-Mu'min. Our understanding linguistically is how the Quran is using this term. Let's continue. Saying is not doing. First comes Islam, then Iman. And this is a point that we talked about before, where As we said, all mu'mins by definition are Muslims, but not all Muslims are mu'min. Ayah says, قالت الأعراب آمنا قل لم تؤمنوا ولكن قولوا أسلمنا ولما يدخل الإيمان في قلوبكم. I'm going to stop here. The untrained, the unvarnished say, we have granted safety, security. قالت آمنا, say, قل, you have not yet granted security. You have not yet granted security. Rather say, we have entered a state of peace and harmony. قولوا أسلمنا. For the act of granting security and safety has not yet entered your heart's orientations. وَلَمَّا يَدْخُلْ الْإِيمَانُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ. So this group, and I would like to cover this particular incident when time comes, inshallah. But these people, they are claiming, first of all, that they have done that act. And they are being reminded, no, you have not done that act. All you have done so far is you've entered the very first stage in a series of steps. And the first stage is where you offer no harm. You begin to harmonize yourself. The fixing part, the enforcing of peace part, the securing part, the active removal of problems and adversities, all of that comes later. But you don't understand this yet. Let's continue. It is not easy to grant security, and this is a point that is sensible, and that is what the Quran refers to and points out to as well. أَحَسِبَ النَّاسِ أَنْ يُتْرَكُوا أَنْ يَقُولُوا آمَنَّا وَهُمْ لَا يُفْتَنُونَ. Do people think that they will be left alone just by saying we have granted security, safety, without being tested? Let's continue. Iman, just like we said before, Iman is seen. It is something seen. It is not something you believe internally. And this is in fact one of the very first ayat that you encounter when you open the Quran. In fact, this comes after the ayat where you asked, or a group of people is being talked about who amanu bil ghaib. We'll talk about what bil ghaib means. But if we look at this ayat that comes after, this ayah is talking about apparently people who claim that they are not going to do this particular act. Let's look at this ayah properly. وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ آمِنُوا كَمَا آمَنَ النَّاسِ قَالُوا أَنُؤْمِنُ كَمَا آمَنَ السُّفَهَاءُ أَلَا إِنَّهُمْ هُمْ السُّفَهَاءُ وَلَكِنْ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. And when they are told, grant safety and security just as the people have granted safety and security. I'm going to stop here. وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ, when it is said to them, آمِنُوا, do this act like people have done before. I want to ask you a question. If I ask you to go and believe like my mother believed, what are you going to say? You're going to say, Musa, dude, I've got no idea what went on in your mother's heart. You might say that you know what happened. She might say that she did certain things from a belief perspective as well, but ultimately I don't know. And there's no way for me to compare what I believe with people. This is impossible. And you would be right if you said that. And that is why, once more, we find that the traditional understanding of the term is not correct. If you open the translations, they will all say, and when it is said to them, believe like the people have believed, they say what they say. But what does that actually mean? How can you ask someone to believe like someone else has believed? You cannot extract the level of belief from somebody's heart to present to somebody else and then compare or test between them. This is impossible. And this is not what the Quran is talking about. So when they are told, this group of people, grant safety and security, just as the people have done this before, what do these people say? Should we grant security like those who were unwise? Those who were unwise have done? Now these people there, they acknowledge, they realize that the act that's being talked about is not something that's internal, but that is something that's visible, something that's outwardly witnessable. So when they say, Kama amana sufaha, they have a people, they have a group that they can point to as fools in their minds and say, well, whatever those guys were doing when they said we were going to go and secure and grant safety and take away problems, they were just fools. Well, these guys here, the bad guys, they are at the very least acknowledging that yes, the act of the verbal noun Iman has got nothing to do with beliefs, but it is an act that needs to be done. Once more, in this ayah, we find certain attributes of what the mu'minun do. they do good deeds, is what we're going to find. Spoiler. They're not the ones who ya'taqidun, who have certain things in their hearts, their minds, their memory banks. They're not the people who have the right aqidah that they adhere to. None of that. إن هذا القرآن يهدي للتي هي أقوم ويبشر المؤمنين. Who are those mu'mineen? الذين يعملون الصالحات أن لهم أجرا كبيرا. Indeed, this Quran guides to that which is most upright and gives good news to those who grant safety and security, the mu'mineen, this group of people that we've been talking about so far, those who do what? Those who perform good deeds, those who undertake good activities, those whose actions speak louder than their internal beliefs. That for them is a great reward. Al-Mu'mineen here is a group of people who are doing things. Amal. Quran is all about action. It's all about what you do. It is not a book. Islam is not a religion where you are rewarded for things that you believe in and things that you say with your mouth, or the number of times that you go up and down, or the number of days where you don't eat food. Whatever you do, that's your choice. But don't make that as something commanded by Allah. The last ayah that I'd like to cover in this video is pointing to a human phenomenon, which is where no matter what you do, you always find conflicts within humans. Humanity is rife with disagreements. And this is something that is universal. And the Quran acknowledges that. So even if there are good people, there are bound to be parties in them. They're bound to become different groups. They're bound to differ. And yes, they can have conflicts. Even these good people, they can have conflicts. But the Quran tells us what we should do if we find ourselves in the midst of such a brawl. وَإِن طَائِفَتَانِ مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ اقْتَتَلُوا فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَهُمَا. And if two groups among those who grant security and safety fight each other, then reconcile between them. فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَهُمَا فَإِن بَغَتْ إِحْدَاهُمَا عَلَى الْأُخْرَى. But if one group transgresses against the other, فَقَاتِلُوا الَّتِي تَبْغِي حَتَّى تَفِي إِلَى أَمْرِ اللَّهِ. I'm going to stop here. Then restore harmony, resist, until they return to alignment with Allah's decree. Once more, message is simple. Even in the good people, even in the groups of people who are doing good, you can find people disagreeing with each other. Our job remains the same. Support the party with the right. This is what the Quran talks about over and over and over, and is consistent in its messaging here in this ayah as well. Even if there are two groups, and each group has been doing good, and they are doing good, yet you are to support the party which is in the right. Even if that could be a party that's going against your family, your country, your people, your tribe, whatever connotations that might have, you are to stick with the group in the right. So like we said, this is the second video of the series. What happens next? These are, very roughly speaking, some of the topics that I would like to cover in this series as time goes on. So the next topic that I would like to talk about is Amanu Billah. What does Iman Billah mean? So if someone says, well, this person did Iman Billah, or Iman bi al-Ghaib, or Iman bi al-Kutub, Iman bi al-Rusul, what does that actually mean? What does that mean? Does that mean, well, I am now saying, well, I have faith in Allah, I have faith in the al-Ghaib, I have faith in the last day? What does it really mean? Is what we're going to talk about in the next video. So from a technical perspective, whenever I add the harf al-jar bi ba'da iman, after iman, what does that signify? This is what I would like to talk about, because this is the area that I was most interested in understanding before. Afterwards, I'd like to talk about who the Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu are, and how do they differ, or do they differ from mu'minun? Are those people alladhina amanu, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu? So all of those ayat that in the Quran, they refer to this group. Who are those recipients? Are they the Jews? Are they the Christians? We're going to talk about this. And then, like I said before in the first video, I think these two terms are so important, because they fundamentally, they do shatter, destroy the traditional foundation of the Islam that we know, paraded around as if it's the real thing, which it's not. But these two terms, they unlock so many ayat of the Quran that is quite ridiculous if you really try and grapple with the ramifications of these two terms and how that opens up the Quran for us. This understanding, I think, and where it leads us, it needs to be acknowledged, it needs to be discussed. Just to give you examples of two areas that we now need to seriously ponder. When we hear and read the ayat about the Sawm in Ramadan, and the group that's being referred to is the Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, well, if those people are not a religious grouping, what happens to the order that's being given to them? That order now, as you can imagine, is no longer confined to religious grouping. Well, what do we do then with it? How do we understand those ayat? Similarly, a very simple ayah that I did cover before in the Salat series, the so-called wudu ayah. So whenever we are apparently standing for this ritual prayer, this namaz, this salah, this ritual prayer, we are meant to go and do those certain actions to clear our limbs, etc. Well, again, that ayah also is referring to Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. So once more, once we understand this term, that action that we talked about is no longer confined to just a group of religious people. So I think there are serious ramifications for this that I'd like to talk about. And as time goes on in this series, once we've gone through this very broad outlines at this point, I would like to keep talking about the very many ayat of the Quran where these terms are utilized. Because as I said before, these two terms, and Iman in particular, they are, in my opinion, my humble opinion, the most important terms of the Quran. Way more important than Salah, or Hajj, or Zakah, or ayyu shay min hadha al-qabil. And if we understand these terms, we really need to make sure that we get a chance to talk about some of the other ayat as well. So as I said before in the first video as well, maybe this series in particular will go on for months, for years. I might do 3 or 4 videos and stop, then come back. But I think as part of my salah, I will like to have these conversations with people in live and get a chance to talk about this ayat. How does that actual plan work? We'll talk about this when the time comes. Last ayah for today. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. And we'll talk about who these people are, like I said before. And I will hopefully have the same ayah in the next video as well. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. Lima taquluna ma la taf'alun. Why do you say what you do not do? Once more, what you do not do. You say stuff that you don't do. Why do you do that? Kabura maqtan indallahi an taqulu ma la taf'alun. It is profoundly detestable in the sight of Allah to declare, to say, to utter words, phrases, ma la taf'alun, that you do not practice, that you do not do. Let's not be people who just say stuff, who just believe stuff, but let's be those people who go and do stuff, who make things happen. Because that is a group in the Quran that we should be aspiring to become a part of. Until the next time, Assalamu alaikum.